everybody. Welcome to the Bridge the Gap DFS podcast, coming to you live from the Permanent Record Recording Studio in Austin, Texas, and broadcast worldwide on Twitch. Very excited about today's guest. This is a guy who's been a hero of mine in the industry for quite a while, and he is just a guy that quietly goes about his business and he executes. And it's been an absolute pleasure getting to learn about him behind the scenes. Recently, he started a Twitch stream and getting out there helping players a little bit more, and it's just incredible to learn more about this guy. He is a top 10 ranked player. I know we talk about Roto Grinders rankings not being the end-all be-all, but he is in the top 10, and if you go to his player page, top 10 across the board, one of the best, if not the best, NBA player in all of DFS. Very excited to welcome to our show Travis Petty, PetteyTheft89. Pett, how you doing, buddy?
Very good. How's it going?
It's going awesome, man. I'm super excited. I know that a lot of people have been requesting to get you on the podcast, and I was like, you know what? I'd love to have him, but I want to be very respectful of people's privacy, and we got to chatting about it a little bit, and I painted the picture for you of what my goal is of this podcast, getting to know other players, and you were all for it, and we got to collaborate on a project earlier this week on your Twitch stream, and it's just like, you know what, this is so incredible for you to start providing this kind of access to people. So I'm just pumped to get involved with your Twitch, support you in any way that I can, and I'm just thrilled to have you on the podcast, buddy.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely good to be here. The Twitch world is awesome. You know, I've only done it for a couple days now. The DFS, the DFS side of things. I did some gaming before, but it's been very positive.
And I'm excited for you because I think what you're doing is revolutionary, and up-and-coming players like myself that want to be in your position one day, it's just awesome to get the access to you, and you are actually fielding questions and giving your real insight. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but before we get too ahead of ourselves, I just want to learn more about you. Can you talk to us about, have you always lived in California? How'd you get started in DFS? I know you have a little bit of a poker background, but I don't want to tell your story. Why don't you tell us what's led you on the path to where you're at currently?
Sure. Obviously, we all have a long story, but making it a little shorter. I went to college like everybody at 18, dropped out at 19, got more seriously into poker around that time. I'd played basically since I was 15 online, but I was pretty mediocre. But I kind of broke through at 19, played online poker till I was about 22. That went well, but then the government shut down online poker, so I did not travel abroad like a lot of other guys. I naively figured that it would come back very soon, so I waited around for a couple years. It did not come back at all. I found myself needing to get a job, so I got lucky with my poker background. I got a trading job in Chicago doing futures commodities. And I was in Chicago for 2 years. About 3 years ago now, I decided to come back to San Diego. It's where I'm from, and do DFS full time, and I've been full time since.
That's the dream, man. You're doing exactly what all of us aspire to be like. And when you started getting into DFS, what was it about it that was so attractive to you that put you in a position to, hey, you know what, I'm going to go for this?
I feel like I started playing DFS long ago, like kind of around the time the poker died. I don't remember. Was there a site? I think there's a site called Draft Day around back in the day.
Yep.
I remember playing $100 games, which I think was super high stakes back in those days, and getting just destroyed. So I lost interest pretty quickly, actually, despite being, a huge sports fan and somebody who likes to gamble as well. But I think a couple years later, a friend of mine needed help with his heads-up basketball versus a friend of his, and he showed me a couple websites with projections and whatnot, and I kind of tweaked it a little bit and helped him win his projections. That kind of gave me a little confidence in myself, and I got back into it, and I started doing better, and from there, things kind of took off.
That's awesome, man. About how long into playing the game did you feel like things started to click for you, where it was like, hey, this went from, piqued my interest to hobby to like, damn, I really like this. This is pretty sweet.
After that initial, the initial time where I wasn't very good, and I took some time off and didn't even think about it. I think I started back in 2014, 2015. It didn't take very long at all, actually. With success, I got more interested into it, and I realized that this was something that I could I could take seriously and do well in. It wasn't until maybe 2000, maybe early 2017, where I kind of started breaking through. I switched my strategy from all cash games to all tournaments, and that's where things really took off. And that was probably the best decision I made.
So that's interesting because, and I think we're starting to see a little bit of a change on the landscape. Is at least when I started playing, everybody was like, cash. Tournaments are dangerous. Be very careful. And I actually found that it's a lot safer playing in tournaments. So what about that? Was it the upside? Was it your tolerance for risk? Does your background in a poker and the finance world, does that how did all of that play into making that decision to start going forward in tournaments?
First off, a side note. I want to note that whoever changed my name back to the proper one, I don't know who's ever spelled Petty that way.
we're I spelled it like Tom Petty to him initially, and we got it right.
That's close.
And then, yeah, so you're talking, and when you get a chance to watch the video, you can see me sending him messages on the phone. I'm a professional player and an amateur.
No, I don't know if it's a mistake, but I'm kind of watching as you do it, and I saw you laughing, and I figured that's what you were doing. I saw you kept going to your phone.
Yeah, producer Mike is so awesome and good at what he does, and he's balancing 2 podcasts right now at the studio, and I barely caught it, and I'm glad that you caught it because I definitely want this podcast to be fun and authentic, and I make mistakes all the time, and we make mistakes all the time playing DFS. It's just being able to laugh at it and move forward. So yeah, we got it right, buddy.
No, it's no worries. I was probably getting another 5 minutes before I was like, that's probably not the right last name or username, I should say.
It's all good, man. We got it.
But anyway, to your question, I'm sorry that I sidetracked there.
No, it's perfect.
You asked why I went from cash to tournaments. I think that was the question.
Yeah.
So I noticed in cash, while it was fairly consistent money, it was getting harder by the year. With the projection sites getting stronger and stronger, I noticed edges were getting smaller and smaller. So I wanted to try something new. I'd never really been a big tournament guy. I kind of played like Empire Maker, if people know his style. He just goes one lineup and everything. And I wanted to expand myself, and I thought tournaments would be a better way to go long term, because it's kind of like poker. Cash games are always going to be solid, but poker is where you get in tournaments you can get the big ROIs. And obviously in poker though, it's a little easier to mass tournaments and DFS than poker though. So I think that's why a lot of people don't play tournaments in poker only. But anyway, so yeah, that change really helped. And I think a lot of cash guys have problems differentiating themselves. They play a lot more chalky, but I noticed even my cash game guys were a little more different than the other cash plays that other people were putting out there. So I knew that would be an edge for me in tournaments.
That's interesting because, when players like us that look up to a player like you, when we think about the success that you've had, we just think about this guy was born with this talent. He shows up and he crushes, and, he's winning money in his sleep. So it's really interesting to me to hear you say, I was a one lineup kind of a person, and, that's how I started, and that's how I feel like a lot of players start. How did you expand from 1? Did you move from 1 to 20 and then slowly move up to 150, or did you dive right into 150? What was that trajectory like?
That's a good question. I don't remember specifically, but I think I just dove right into it. That's kind of how I've always been. If I'm going to go into something, I'm going to go into something fully, for better or worse. And there's definitely been worse at times.
That makes sense. That makes sense. That is one of my the things that I appreciate most about you is learning about the work ethic that went into everything that you've done and accomplished as a player. Now, looking back when you were making this transition and you start to build up some steam, did you start running into roadblocks or anything that you can identify that held you back most as a player back then?
I actually thought things went pretty good initially. I had a very good start in terms of the climb, but there was definitely setbacks. There was a couple times where I wanted to quit. I remember at one point, this was, I want to say late 2000, maybe late 2017. It could be late 2016, actually. One of the two. It was an NBA season in December. And I remember I was trying to tweak my strategy and figure things out because what I had been doing was not working out. And I probably gave myself maybe a month to figure things out, or else I was going to kind of slowly phase out of DFS and move on. I've always been kind of a DFS's future has been a little muddy, murky. But anyway, I ended up hitting big. I remember with a D'Angelo Russell team one night. I think I profited 100 something thousand, and I haven't really looked back from there. I haven't had really plans of quitting since then. But that was the closest I got to quitting.
That's incredible, because I think that most players go through something like that, and to hear you say that is incredibly relatable. My story was I was looking at this in a similar vein. I got down to just kind of breaking even, and I told myself, $1,000, man, you got $1,000 to make this work or you're out. So, I mean, it's awesome to hear that, man, because this is, inspiring to us guys that look up to you, that, it's not just a path paved with gold. Were there any mistakes that you would say that you made early on as approaching your play, or is there any mistake that you see that trips up beginning players quite often?
As for mistakes I see, so I'll talk in terms of NBA, because I think all sports are so different, but I understand NBA the best for sure of any of the sports. I think people, it's something I tell beginners, because I think beginners get tripped up this more than anybody, is I think they get too crazy on playing some random bench guy who might have had a decent game right beforehand. Some guy who has very little value, and all of a sudden they're playing a guy who literally has no upside and is not going to win you a tournament at all. And he's basically a waste of a roster spot. That, if I had one tip to give new players, don't play any bench guys at all, because more often than not, you're going to screw yourself.
And it's hard. It's hard. I think, when you're attacking a beast like NBA, the landscape changes so much. I liken NBA DFS. It's the closest thing to the stock market. And if you're a casual player and you see, hey, this bench guy went off and he got 33 minutes, and you don't understand the rotations on the team and the flow and who might have been in or out, that is a mistake I made quite a bit as a new NBA player. So I think that's incredibly relevant. One of my favorite things about you from your stream that I was on the other day is you are very realistic, but you're not negative about it. You actually are realistic with positivity and optimism, and I really like that. And, one of the things that we were asking you the other day is about losing streaks and the swings. And, can you talk a little bit more about that? Because what you had to say I felt was incredibly refreshing to hear from a player of your caliber.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who plays just tournaments, right, I'm going to have massive swings both ways. And I mean, right now I'm on a pretty nasty downswing. I don't even know how big it is, but it's pretty sizable. And during a downswing, you lose all confidence. You feel like you're doing nothing right. You constantly tinker with your strategy. And I know in baseball, I'm not very good. Compared to a small stakes or a micro stakes player, I'm very good. But compared to a high stakes player, I don't think I'm very good at all. And that's where I want to be. I want to be a good high stakes player. But right now, I feel like I've tinkered with my strategy 100 times in the last week, and it's just a thing. Like when you're losing, you lose your confidence. You don't know exactly what you want to do, and it's really, really hard, And that's kind of what DFS is, though. Like you're playing with what 10 to 15% effective rake. You're playing as really, really good players, and in baseball, it's such a volatile sport. It's really, really difficult. In sports like basketball, if I go on a downswing, I can usually figure out what's going on. I'm confident enough to tweak my strategy a little bit, but not completely overhaul it. But then you got the flip side, when you're winning, it doesn't matter if your strategy is good or not. You just feel invincible, right? You feel like you're doing everything perfect, and that could be kind of dangerous. That could be just as dangerous as tweaking your strategy when you're losing sometimes. But it's funny. I feel like if you looked at my how I felt DFS wise in middle of January versus right now, I'm much more happy in January during NBA season. I'm at my worst right now, honestly.
But I mean, this is why I wanted to have you on the show, because we think that the guys that are the best at this game just show up and print money every single day. And it's incredibly cool to hear, a stud basketball player like yourself battle some of the mental hurdles with a sport like baseball that you're trying to master. And I just appreciate that everything you do, you take with a mastery approach. And, I want to, before we move on to the next subject, I want to just touch on a little bit more. So when things aren't going well for you, what are you doing to stay level, whether in your approach or your time away from the game? I know earlier this week you had thought about taking a couple days off. What can we as players, when we struggle, what can we do to help keep our mind clear and refocus to attack when things aren't going well?
So for me, the one good thing about myself is when I lose, I really hunker down and put a lot of work in. I try to figure out what I'm doing wrong and change my strategies and whatnot to figure how to right the ship, right? And I think that's what you need to do. You just need to take a step back and look at what you're doing, and you need to first decide, is what I'm doing correct, or am I just going through an unlucky streak? Because unlucky streaks do happen. You need to be careful not to tweak your winning strategy when you're just going through an unlucky streak. But that's one of the hardest things to do is to be honest with yourself. Is what I'm doing right or not? And when you're losing, it's very, very difficult to tell the difference between the two. But I usually take a step back and try to research even harder and try to figure out what's going wrong, if anything.
And I think that's incredibly relevant, because there's so many factors outside of our control when we play this game, and it's variance is involved, especially the sport like Major League Baseball, where it's sometimes I wonder why any of us play baseball with the amount of variance that we encounter. But I think that being able to distinguish between it's a right process, wrong result is so incredibly important. So when you're looking at that, do you look back at your sample size, your play over large numbers? What's the number one thing that helps you distinguish between, hey, bad variance versus bad strategy?
Well, on the last question, I also wanted to say one more thing. There are days, like in baseball or any sport, where if one single person didn't have one single lineup, or two guys had their two lineups, that could be the difference between hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's crazy, because when you look at hindsight, like if I'm sure this happened many times over every month, but if I look a month in the past at baseball, when I started my bad run, I'm sure I could find 2 or 3 days where if you get rid of 2 or 3 lineups in front of me, I'm making tons of money, and the difference between hundreds of thousands of dollars won in a day and breaking even are so close that's what makes it very difficult to know, like in a sport like baseball, if you're doing the right thing or not. And it's crazy what little points make a difference between say $150,000 win a day and breaking even. And again, when you win the 150,000, you're gonna feel like you did everything right. When you break even, you're like, what the heck just went wrong? But it's just a couple points. But sorry, what was your next question?
No, I was just saying, how do you distinguish between when things aren't going well, that hey, this is just an unfortunate run of variance versus a flawed process? Do you rely on your sample size? How are you able to distinguish between when you're in that gray area?
Well, first, my confidence in the sport. If it's NBA, I can have a pretty good idea of looking back on what went wrong or what I've done wrong. I know I had well, it's all relative, right? I had a bad run in NBA to start last season, and I ended up tweaking a couple things, and it fixed everything. In a sport like that, it's your confidence and your knowledge. And baseball, it's a little more tough. I do a lot more like looking back at past samples and changing my model around and seeing my results and kind of trying to get a little back testing going. I think that's very powerful in baseball, but it's tough. It's really tough.
Now, playing NBA on DraftKings, that's my favorite format, but the thing that's so incredibly frustrating is the stat corrections. I don't know what it was about the scoring this last year where there was a stat correction every single day, and it was just holding your breath. You're looking at Basketball Monster or whatever to see and verify if the stats are correct, and then you're just waiting for those fluctuations. And we see it quite often with MLB. It happened last night when Matt Olson hit that home run. Lots of money changes with something like that so late. So when that is happening to you, or when you're in that roller coaster of a top five, how are you keeping your emotions in check with those kinds of swings that can come with late scoring? And how do you not, or to the best of your ability, how are you not getting upset if a stat correction or something late that happens breaks not in your favor?
Yeah, so I didn't notice it. I don't really know, or didn't know it was a big thing in baseball. I didn't know about the Matt Olson home run yesterday, but in basketball, it doesn't. It sucks, right, when it goes against you. I've had it go both ways, but in the end, the stats are stats, right? I always look at ESPN, kind of when things are close, and kind of try to figure out how much each guy actually has. So I have a pretty good idea of what's wrong or whatnot, and especially towards the end of the nights, like I can tell you exactly how much a guy actually has. So it doesn't really affect me at all. It just takes a little bit of manual scorekeeping, right, and using ESPN and what. It doesn't affect me at all, really.
So in the top-heavy tournaments, when you are so close, we can see a tournament that will have 100,000 to first, 25 to second. When you're in a situation like that, number one, it's amazing to even be that close, but how are you keeping your emotions in check when you're that close to that much bigger of a payday?
Oh, it's tough. Ideally, I walk away from the computer because I can't do anything, or the television, and not watch the game. But it's really difficult not to, right? Because who doesn't enjoy a good sweat at the end of the game when you have a chance of winning 100,000 or winning at 1,000 if things go really, really poorly, right? It's tough. It's tough. Ideally, I think with the amount that I play a day, I would be able to lock my teams in, only deal with late swap stuff if need be, and not watch a single game. But it's tough because, like basketball, I love watching basketball, right? So it's like the ability to watch the games and have a stake in each one is awesome. But when things are going poorly, there's nothing worse. But I don't have a good answer for that. I think not watching the game would be the best thing you could do. But I kind of just go through the anxiety of the last 20 minutes of the last game, like most people probably do. I don't really have a good way to deal with it other than not watching.
And this is more than anything why I wanted to talk to you, because I thought it was so cool to have a player of your caliber who is just honest with their approach to stuff like that. A lot of the times we think about these professionals that are, the top 1% of 1% that play this game, and they're just robotic. They don't get too high. They don't get too low. They're just, I'm going to put in my lineups, whatever, and I'll print money. So it's awesome to hear a player like you that is, DFS is supposed to be fun first. And you're right. It's super fun to sweat when it's that close. Even when it doesn't work out, you're still thrilled about being that close to it. So I really appreciate you just being honest about, like, hey man, I'm human, and could I do it a different way? No, but where's the fun in that? So I appreciate you sharing that, man. One of my favorite things about you when I've been a fan of yours for a while, and there's articles. I first heard about you 4 or 5 years ago when the articles are talking about, hey, these guys are playing daily fantasy sports for winning, and they would talk about, Max Dolery and CSU Ram, and, those guys' rises were seemingly more meteoric, and they're hitting big scores. And the thing that stood out to me about you the most is that, as far as I know, you were the only one out of that group that was actually like working their way through the stakes. So can you talk a little bit more about why it's so important to start small and stay small while you're learning how to play this game?
Absolutely. I mean, looking from like a Saho's perspective, Saho's the easiest way to see it. Everybody, it's the most public. He ended up, he's a very good player, but his rise through the stakes was the same reason why he had the downfall. He rose through the stakes because he bullied the heads up lobby. He crushed at GPPs. And he played probably above his bankroll initially. I don't know what his bankroll was, but I think he kind of caught fire as well as being aggressive with bankroll. But then that also led to his downfall. He tried to expand into multiple sports, and he ended up trying to take down like the best guys at like NHL and sports like that, and got absolutely destroyed. So no, the bankroll management's huge. So for myself, I I was fortunate where I started with a small amount of money, but because I played cash games in an easier landscape than now, I was pretty consistently making money. So I was able to build a nice little bankroll up in the initial, my initial few seasons playing before I got into tournaments. And by the time I got into tournaments, I had a decent enough roll where I could enter the medium stakes. I could max the medium stakes every night and be fine and kind of dabble in the 1Ks initially. It took me a little while to get comfortable in the 1Ks because, again, when you get in there, you look at the players against you, and it's all the guys you looked up to, right? It's guys where you don't put yourself in the same category as them, even though if everybody's database is public, you realize your scores are a lot better than these guys, but you don't actually know. You only see their Twitter or some of these guys post that they win every night. You don't know that until you actually play these guys night after night, and then slowly I realized that I'm better than a lot of these guys. And then I finally moved into the Thunderdome and the Beast on FanDuel, which is the $5,300 tournaments. And it's been a slow rise, but I think every time you win enough at a certain level and with a decent enough sample, you can comfortably move yourself up. I know some people have issues where they have a family or whatnot, and that makes it very difficult for those people. But I was fortunate where I don't have a family or didn't have a family when I was rising up. I had a job as a commodities trader on the side as well that gave me some income as well for expenses, and just the timing worked out really well for me.
So there's a couple things I want to follow up on, but the first thing I want to touch on is I often say that the most dangerous player to play this game is a guy with a day job. I know that the dream is to quit your day job and play this game. What would you say to the guys that do have that great source of income where they can play this game a little bit more fearlessly about, hey, don't be in such a hurry to quit your day job? Or would the advice be the opposite of that? Hey, get out of there as quickly as possible. What would you say to somebody that, maybe is resenting their day job and thinks that they could play DFS every day, but, the dream often isn't the same as the reality?
Oh, 100%. It's definitely not. The dream is not the same as the reality. So what I would tell these people is, one, in most instances, without even knowing the person's, what their background is, I would say keep your day job. I think that's very, very important. Let's say you make $4K a month. That $4K a month is so helpful to your bankroll. I assume most of these people who are thinking about quitting don't have massive rolls, right? So that $4K is everything. If you go through a bad 2-month stretch, you might be done already. And that is very, very scary. Number two, I would say DFS is a great sport, but it's not going to be around forever, right? I've seen this in poker, although poker's kind of made a comeback in the last couple of years, but you never know what's going to happen. Like DFS was riding such a high 2-3 years ago when the government started coming down, and I think it lost a lot of its luster. I'm not very bullish on DFS being a thing in I think it's going to lose some of its luster, and it's not going to be the same as right now in about 3 years, I would say. I think it's going to slowly lose players, unfortunately, especially with like sports betting coming around. But for the people who think that like quitting and this is going to be the greatest thing ever, when you turn your hobbies into a job, shit gets really real. And you feel the swing so much harder. I would not recommend it to anybody without knowing your situation really in depth.
And I think that's smart. I think, some of the advice that I've got from some aspiring pros and people that are pro is, pretend like you don't have a day job. If you really want to see what this is like, don't use your day job money. Pay your bills at a DFS just to see what that's like. It's incredibly challenging. It's awesome. It definitely is, something that I enjoy greatly, but you're right. It's not something that, can be a hobby and then keep it a hobby. I think that, if you're going to continue to have professional results, you got to check some of the hobby stuff at the door. So what would you say for somebody when they're testing something out? I think that the temptation is to figure something out at like the quarters, and then they want to immediately hop into the $4 tournament the next day. Can you talk to you a little bit more about what you would do in terms of contest selection for a new or casual or somebody that wants to get more serious about their play but doesn't really have, the sample size to justify moving up in stakes?
Sure. Yeah. First, if you're a quarters player, let's say the first thing you need is the bankroll to play the higher level. I don't know what that means in terms of how many, in poker they call it how many buy-ins you have to determine. I don't know how many buy-ins or entries you need to have to move up, but it should be a pretty good amount, and it also depends on what your ROI is. The higher the ROI, the less buy-ins you can get away with when you move up. But I think you need consistent results for a pretty long time. And with that said, you can't be like a 40% return, which is amazing, but have like one win be the difference between winning and losing, because anybody can win once, right? And I think I saw somebody recently posted or was talking to me about this, and they said they had, I think, like a 20% ROI. I was like, oh, that's awesome. I kind of like, why are you playing the smaller stakes? And then he kept telling me more and more about his background, and then he said he had one big tournament win. That without that, he's a losing player, and that's where it gets a little a little gray. Because again, you need to win tournaments to win. If you're not winning tournaments, you're not going to be profitable. But if one tournament is your win, then it's hard for me to say whether you should move up or not.
I think you're incredibly on point. I think I encourage people to, hey, if you want to do this, if you want professional results, start treating it like a professional. So ultimately you're the CEO of your business. So are you going to do amateur stuff as you decide how you want to move up, or are you going to act like a professional? So I definitely think there's a really good carryover from a buy-in system like we see in poker. Hey, I'm going to play in this until I have 100 buy-ins to move up 200 or whatever. But we're moving into football season here in about a month. Your bread and butter is basketball. So what advice would you give to players that are stronger in one sport as they move into playing another sport? Because another mistake that I think that we make as beginning and new and casual players is, hey, I crushed baseball season. I'm going to jump into football with my confidence at all-time high, play the same stakes, and then you just blow off all of your stacks that took so long to win in baseball.
Yeah, I mean, that's very relevant for me as well. Like back when like 2014, 15, whatever, when I made my roll in basketball and I melted most of it in baseball. That's a very real thing for people. You got to be very careful with that. But at the same time, I think NFL is a pretty good sport to get into. Like, even if you're not that good at NFL, I think it's very winnable, especially at the lowest stakes. And the thing is, I think if you're confident enough in yourself, I think you need to be more aggressive at the beginning of seasons, because that's the best time of the year. You don't want to be passive at the beginning of the year and scared, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh no, I actually am as good as I think I am, into week 7 or 8 when the games are getting harder all of a sudden. I think being aggressive early is important. And to not be so doom and gloom about the last thing we talked about. I know guys as well who do very well at mid stakes, and I would imagine they have a good enough roll to play higher stakes stuff, but they're scared to move up. And we've all been there before, and it's like the guy going from the quarters to the $4. It's scary to move up, because all of a sudden your quarter 150 entries, which is what 37.50, turns into a $600 if you max. That's a big jump. You obviously don't have to make that big of a jump, but it's scary. But you realize that once you lose that $600, it's a weird feeling, in that, like, assuming you strike out, which doesn't happen really unless you're me in baseball. But if you lose that $600, you realize it's really not that bad. It's not the end of the world. You kind of desensitize that amount. Like, I remember losing $1,000 several years ago and being like, shoot, this is awful. But it happened. And now if I lose a lot more, my numbers go a lot higher. And it's not the biggest deal in the world, It's okay to lose. And the only way you're going to get comfortable playing higher stakes is playing them. If you don't play them, you're never going to move up, and you're going to look back and be like, shoot, I wish I would have moved up and been more aggressive, but I was scared. And I think there's a lot of people who are like that. But sorry, what was the question you just asked? Sorry.
We'll get back to that, but I want to stay where we're at. I think that,
Sure.
I almost feel like you downloaded my DraftKings CSV and are reading it and speaking specifically to me. I've worked my way up through the quarters, playing at the $5 and below level right now. I had the best 3-day heater of my career earlier in July, and immediately blew off half of the stacks over the next 2 weeks, and it just shook me to my core. And I dropped back down in stakes and kind of did some bankroll restructuring, but I felt like crap, man. So the fact that you've been through that and you can say something encouraging to players like us that, if you want to be good at this game, you're going to have to experience it. It's almost like a rite of passage, like you're going to get your teeth kicked in at some point. So can you just elaborate a little bit more about what you just said in terms of it's so foreign, especially in our culture, to say it's okay to lose, but it is when you're playing this game. Can you just elaborate a little bit more about, being forgiving of yourself in your results when it doesn't go well?
Absolutely. I mean, if you've been doing great this year and then you get that 3-day heater, I'd want more than a 3-day sample. But if over the year you've done well, let's say you've stayed afloat more or less without even wins, or maybe you've just been winning it the whole year, but this has been your biggest 3 days. I think it's okay. It's okay to take chances. It's okay to take shots up. I think I took a little more aggressive path because, yes, I had the job on the side for security if things didn't work out. And that wasn't, again, that wasn't when I took the job, it wasn't my initial intention for it to be that way, but that's kind of what it turned into. But that's the beauty of having the job as well. But anyway, if you never give yourself a chance to move up, you're never going to reach your potential. If I had been scared to move up, I would probably still be a medium stakes player right now. I'd probably still be a medium stakes player right now. And I would never, ever reach my potential, which, I still don't think I have, but I've done really well in fantasy, right? And I think there's a lot of guys in the medium stakes that people don't really know about that absolutely crush it. And the reason nobody knows about them is because they're scared to play high stakes for one reason or another. Everybody's got their own situations, right? But you got to understand it's not as scary as it seems to play the 1Ks and whatnot. Like, again, 2 years ago, I couldn't even imagine playing the 5Ks. I remember occasionally looking at the 5K 3-mans, which I don't play, but I look at the 3-mans and be like, oh, is there a fish here or is there not a fish here? And then if I saw a fish there, I'd be like, oh gosh, do I play or not? This is kind of scary. Even though in my head, I know that with a fish in the game, I have to be a favorite, no matter who the third player is, even if it's the best player in the world. I'm a favorite with a fish in the game. But it's terrifying. Like losing 5,000 in one game. Back in the day, I was like, that's a car. You can buy a car with that amount of money, right? That's scary. But once you sit in the games for a little while, you realize again it's not as scary as it looks. And you kind of ease your way. You kind of ease your way and become more confident. And when you lose the money, it happens. Again, it's not something where I just like shrug it off my shoulders when I lose, 80% of my money a day. It sucks, but you deal with it, right? You move on the next day.
That's going to lead me right into our next topic. Is one of the things that I appreciate most about you is your tenacity. I think that you're probably one of the strongest mental game players in the game, and I don't think having a strong mental game, I think that's very prevalent in poker, but I think it's something that's largely overlooked at DFS. Talk to us a little bit more about the mental side of DFS, why it's important, and how you walk into the scenarios and look at it and get over being terrified to start attacking something and just jumping headfirst into the unknown, like moving up in stakes like you did.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the, people ask me why poker players become DFS players. Like, you make quick decisions. You're used to using math to help your strategy and stuff like that. But also the mental game is important too. I've been here before, right? In poker, you had the same exact thing. I started at penny stakes and I moved my way all the way up to, by the end I played mid stakes. And when I was 21, I was comfortable mid stakes. Now I think about it, I was the guy I was talking about in the DFS, the last thing, the medium stakes player. I was comfortable at that, and therefore never seek to be a better player than that. I made enough money where I was like, oh, this is cool. Now it's different. Now I want to be the best, and to be the best, you got to play the higher stakes. But I think the poker background really helped in that regard, in terms of understanding like it's time to move up, and mentally. It's hard to say why my mental game is better than anybody else's. I don't know if it is, because you never, it's funny because we're all behind computers, right? You don't know how bad it is for somebody unless like they're posting on Twitter, like just tilting whatever. And I mean, you see me on one of my Twitch things. I get frustrated too, right? But at the end of the day, once the games are over, or even once they start, there's nothing you can do, right? You just have to let it go. If you let yesterday's your pitcher getting shelled, affect you that much, you're gonna let it affect you the next time the guy pitches. So like Merrill Kelly crushed me, for example, 2 days ago. If Merrill Kelly's cheaping against in the right spot, 4 or 5 days when he pitches again, now I don't care. I'll play him again. I don't mind guys burning me. Somebody in my Twitch chat asked me, who is your favorite DFS player in NBA? And I said, I actually don't know. And they said, like, who's won you a lot of money? I was like, I have no idea. I don't really remember those things very well at all, right? That I don't have the best memory, and it kind of helps me in some regard. And that once the next day starts, I don't think about the past that much.
Well, and I think, if we're looking at these athletes that, we're supporting and cheering on, the best in the world are the ones that have that short-term memory loss. And, I think that it's incredibly refreshing to hear you say, I want to have no relationship about what this person did, good or bad, because I think one of the best ways to capitalize, especially in a sport in NBA, is going right back to somebody. And what I just heard you say is, regardless of what Kelly did 2 days ago, I'm making that decision 100 out of 100 times. And I think that being able to look at your process over profits with a long-term view is one of the things that separates a winning player from a losing player, and not getting too attached to the day-to-day. What would you say that you do mentally to stay strong? Is it self-talk? Are you meditating? Are you just, is it your competitive? I feel like you're a competitive force of nature, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. So what do you think that you do that makes you so mentally strong when attacking this game?
No, I'm very competitive, and now that I've getting closer to the top of DFS, I'm not even there or close to there. Like, that's the only reason why I continue to play baseball. It would have been really easy for me to not play baseball this season. Like, historically, I'm not very good at it. I'm either break even or a small loser, and yet I still continue to play these high stakes games. You can call me competitive, you can call me stubborn, but in my mind, to be the best, which is where I want to be, I need to be good at baseball. It's the only like daily sport for what, a 3-4 month stretch. So yeah, you could say I'm super competitive, and I hate losing. It really drives me nuts that I can't figure this damn game out. Baseball's tough, man. I feel like it's naive when I say, sometimes I'll say, like, people win in baseball, such a volatile sport, they're lucky. But I think when I've seen when I've seen people post like a profit graph from like the top 30 people, you can kind of see people do just as well in baseball as people do, like the top guys in baseball do just as well as the top guy in basketball. So, that leads me to believe that baseball actually has a lot of edge, and I'm just not figuring out what it is. So, being competitive person I am, or stubborn, I'm constantly trying to figure out what they're doing, and it is very difficult. But that keeps me excited, right? Again, like, I was super down and out after yesterday. Like, I pretty much struck out, and I want to tell myself I'm done. But then, this morning I started doing research again and trying to figure out again what's going wrong, and I'm hellbent on figuring out. And I think maybe a lot of people aren't quite like that. They go through a losing streak, and instead of trying to figure out what's wrong, they just keep playing and keep hoping things change. I don't want to hope things turn around. I want to be the change, right?
And that's one of my favorite things about you. And if let's say, there was an opportunity to bet on, let's say you made it to a live final, like you would be my favorite contestant to bet on every single time because you're a workhorse. And I don't think people understand how much work you put into this game. Like you are a bell cow running back, and, there's going to be some games you rush 23 times for 56 yards and you got to fight for every inch. But then there's other times you're dropping 200 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns. So can you talk a little bit more about the work that goes into being a successful player? Because I think that your perspective on this is incredibly refreshing. And again, going back to your realistic but optimistic attitude when attacking DFS.
Yeah. Sorry, I here need to tell me the question again, but just want to go back at the live final comment. I would not be the guy you want in the live finals, apparently. I'm like 0 for $1 million, and I've never actually cashed higher than like 8th place. I don't know what's wrong with me. But I actually have a live final in Chicago in 2.5 weeks for baseball for DraftKings, and I feel like in this weird, twisted DFS world, I'm going to take it down just because I've been so awful at baseball and so awful in live finals. I have a weird feeling, and I'm not superstitious either, but sorry, that's part of start for the side note.
No, so what you just said is why I would bet on you. If my sports book, if they were offering odds on that, I would push all of my chips in on you because it's in Chicago. Who's the most well-known athlete of all time in Chicago? It's Michael Jordan. And everybody knows what he said about being successful. Like, I win because I've missed so much. I'm putting the time in and getting into the gym. And that's why I would always bet on petty theft and not think twice about it, buddy. So you're going to win that live final, and we're going to look back at this, and it's going to be like, holy shit, we predicted on this podcast. But, talk about that work that you put in to, keep taking those shots and fail, but know, like, dude, every missed shot I take is the next shot closer to my next heater.
Yeah, I mean, my whole thing always was you try something. If it fails, you try something else, right? And you just keep going until you figure out what it is. Or even when you're winning at a certain sport, there's always a way to get better. No matter if you're the worst or even the best. The best player can get better at DFS, as crazy as it may seem to some people. Some people think that, for example, Osama baseball is the best player and he's perfect. He's not perfect. He may be the best player, but there's always something you can improve. And for me, again, in baseball, I'll try 2 or 3 different things. I'll again, during when I'm losing, I'll backtest 2 or 3 different things a day, different models and strategies, and try to figure out, if it's good enough. Now it's difficult because baseball's so volatile that you have to generally go back a lot longer than, say, even a week worth of backtesting to figure out if you're doing the right stuff. And unlike what people think, I'm not a big programmer or whatnot. I can't build some perfect backtesting system. I can't do that. But again, if you're not putting work into your game every single day, even if you're winning, you're gonna get caught. You're gonna get left behind. And there's been a lot of guys already like that. Like some of the guys you've already named in this stream have been left behind because they never probably put the work in. And especially when they were doing well. There's guys in 2016 who it's funny. Once if I told you their name, you're like, oh yeah, what happened to that guy? There's hundreds of those guys, right? And I remember, going back to my Chicago days, like work ethic wise, I think that's when I was really at my best, is when I was first starting out. That's when you need to be at your absolute best. Is I remember I would wake up at 6 a.m, go to work at 7, get back from work 3:30 to 4, do DFS stuff till 6 when the lock was, take a quick break, and then I would be sweating games or doing post-lock swaps until 11 p.m. every night, and just would do that every single day. Like I put so much work into everything, and like if you want to be successful, that's what you got to do. It's it seems easy until you're literally grinding every single day doing this. I've put a lot of work in. I know some of you guys only started a couple years ago. I've been doing this for 5 years.
Well, this is why I wanted to have you on, man, because I think that if there were ever a role model and, in DFS, and you'd probably be like, Charles Barkley, I'm not a role model. Like, you have the foundation. I think so much about being a good DFS player is being foundationally strong first, then try to tinker with some of the stuff behind the scenes in lineup rewind or however you're doing your back testing. But one of the things that I want to touch on, it's a polarizing topic in DFS, and I think that it's never going to go away, and we're starting to see more transparency be shed on some of the tout sites. So I want to talk to you about, what are your thought processes on tout sites versus content sites, and what's the value for a player that wants to get better of doing their own research versus just trusting something else that someone is telling them that is good?
I've never been too big on tout sites. So for myself and my own stuff, I haven't used a tout site. Like I haven't looked at an article about, this player is good because X, Y, and Z. I haven't done that in seemingly years. For me, I think to be the best, you got to do your own thing. But what do I think about the sites? I don't know. It really depends on the sites. It's hard for me to really say too much about each and every site because, again, I don't read the articles, so I don't know. Maybe they're full of gold, and I don't know that. But I am I do believe that for the most part, if you can't profit at a game, I think it's difficult for you to be teaching it, right? I know there's that line, those who can't do teach. And for me, like I would never imagine myself at like on a website making people pay for my baseball information, even though like I think I am like a winner in low stakes baseball, so I guess I could say I'm a winner if I played just that, but like I wouldn't feel very comfortable making people pay for my stuff. Like some of these guys, I've seen the results and it's pretty bad, and some of these guys don't even play at all. Like if you're not playing DFS, how can you tout DFS? I don't understand that at all, and I think it's scary because people are getting such. I'm not gonna say they're getting bad information because I don't know, but they're getting information from a person who doesn't even participate in DFS. And I just think it's dangerous, and I just remember, I'm not gonna name the site, but back in 2014-15, I was looking at one site's stuff and I was reading an article about who they would play, and I remember looking at their lineups, and they didn't have one guy in the lineups, and I was just. That's kind of my aha moment. Like, what am I even reading this article for? This guy doesn't even play the guys he has in it. And I get like lineup constructions of things. Sometimes the guys you're excited about don't come in, but like to not have any of them to me was just ridiculous. And again, these people are writing articles to make money. So you think they're incentivized, right, to make good articles, but in the end, there's no transparency on how these people are actually doing publicly. Like there's no people aren't like looking at their articles every day and saying like, oh, how did these guys do, or how much do so there's no recourse, if they're doing poorly or not. People are still buying their articles and blindly assuming that these people know what they're doing when I don't know if that's actually a fact. And then you go into sites like StakeKings, and I think that's the most dangerous of them all because you got guys who are charging 1.2 markup, which is 20% ROI to break even, which, I mean, for the events these guys are playing, I don't know if there's 10 guys who I would take long-term to make 20% in a single sport. It's crazy that some of these guys are marking up, and some of these guys are losing players. So if a guy is a 10% loser, and I hope my math's right here, and he's charging 1.2, then you're going to lose 30% on average. That is absolutely crazy. And people are still buying these people especially after they have a win. They'll post on Twitter like, "Oh, look how good I am," and it drives me nuts. And I know there's the other side where people are like, "Oh, it's entertainment for these people," or these people would lose that much money if they play on their own anyway. Maybe it's more exciting, and I don't know. It's tough for me. It's a gray area. I want to speak about it on Twitter. I don't really post on Twitter, but at the same time, I don't really want to post about it too much because there's different perspectives.
There are. And, I think it's important to encourage people to think for themselves always. And I really appreciate you saying that because I feel the same way. And it's like, if this were, my background prior to DFS is insurance. If I'm selling, an insurance coverage and you're paying me for the coverage and then a claim happens and there's no coverage, that's fraud. I'm going to jail. So I don't understand how what these guys are doing for the most part isn't considered as such. So it makes me, it re-enthuses my passion as to why to rail against these guys, because, I'm trying to be like you. I'm not like you, but there's nothing special about me. And the number one thing that attributed to me that changes the players, I just got sick and tired of listening to these dumbasses and losing money. I just started thinking for myself. I was like, dude, I can lose money on my own. I'm pretty good at it. So if I'm going to burn my money on fire, I'm going to go down swinging. So I really appreciate you being honest about that, man. So, before we wrap, I want to touch on we've had some pretty, hot and heavy subject here, but I want to get into something a little bit fun. Can you talk to us about, your feelings on Lonzo Ball and why you feel the way that you do?
I would love to tell you about what I feel about Lonzo Ball, but I want to go back one more time.
Absolutely.
Explain one more thing,
buddy.
This is you and me. It's a conversation, but this is the reason why, I'm just gonna say I'm pretty darn anti-tout, and I get some people like, you gotta make money somehow, right? And you gotta sell your services, and sell your services, you need to be vocal. I get that, so I can't hate too much because of that. But that's the one guy, I'm not gonna call him tout because I don't think he is, but the one guy I follow and I listen to and I support is Manny, M. Laura, because he doesn't do any of that. He helps people, he does on Twitch, he helps people out. But he's not on Twitter all day just retweeting screenshots or whatnot, or tooting his own horn all day. He just goes about his business and helps people out. That's why I have so much more respect for him than any of those other guys. I remember I had somebody ask me once, like, why do I like him and not the other people? I just like the way he goes about his business. The whole screenshot, on Twitter thing really, really drives me nuts because, again, these people are not screenshotting when they lose. There's a couple of guys on Twitter, I don't follow DFS Twitter too much because it drives me nuts, but there's a couple of guys on Twitter that will post screenshots like every time they lose big. And I have so much more respect for those guys. Like, I know those guys are the ones that are crushing and doing well because they're comfortable, with that. But for your insurance thing, it's exactly like that, right? I'm not going to say that it's fraud because, I mean, it kind of is fraud, but it seems like a little aggressive term.
I'll say it.
But
those guys.
It is what it is, right? Like, again, if you're charging enough where someone's going to lose 30% on average, that's crazy. And like what you said about losing on your own rather than listening to people, let's just assume you play you play 2 seasons, you play the same season twice in like some sort of simulation. One season you listen to guys, you lose 5%. Okay, the other simulation you play on your own, you lose 10%. I'm going to argue that playing on your own, losing 10% is insanely more valuable long-term than listening to these guys and formulating opinions mainly off these people. You're going to be such a better player long-term. You're going to get that 5% you lost back, I guarantee, the next season. And I think that's the problem. Some of these people get stuck on listening to touts because, they think the touts are great and it's going to help them. And they don't realize the potential and they're just stuck in the mud. But anyway, Lonzo Ball, how did I feel Lonzo Ball? I'll tell you what, I'm a little conflicted these days because he's got traded, although got us Davis. So I'm actually okay because I'm going to consider him the reason we got Davis. I bought the shoes. I got the $500 shoes. So I'm invested in them long term. I'm kind of hoping that they end up being really valuable one day because, first of all, I think the fact that he has his own shoe is crazy. The Big Baller brand is more or less dead now. So I think there's only so many shoes out there. So I have a weird hope that one day those $500 Big Ballers O2s become super valuable. But I'm bullish on his long term. I really like his outlook. Again, he can't shoot, but if he learns how to shoot, he's got all the other tools. And there are guys who came to the league who can't shoot and learned how. And on top of that, he did shoot in college. He was his free throws weren't good, which is not a good long term outlook for him. But he hit threes in college, and I was watching of course, I was watching a high school video of Lonzo back in the day, and he's hitting step back 3-pointers like it's nobody's business, and they're NBA range. And of course, you only see the highlights, and I know when you watch these high school videos or these Drew League videos, I love watching basketball. Nobody misses. It makes these guys look like they're absolutely incredible. But just the confidence he had in this team was crazy. I think that him going to the Pelicans is going to be good for him because I think the spotlight was so big on him in LA, being from there and being the number 2 pick. And, his dad didn't obviously help him, although I am a fan of his dad. I'm never going to hate on somebody who supports their son too much, right? Because I think it goes the opposite way more often than not. But I still have belief in Lonzo, even though it'll crush me if the Lakers don't end up winning a title and Lonzo becomes like a very, very good player like I expect.
Now, I'm very bullish on Lonzo as well. So
There we go.
My whole attitude is, and we see this with Ben Simmons. Why does Ben Simmons and Lonzo Ball get criticized when they're doing everything almost to a T like a guy like Draymond Green? So, just because they can't shoot, but it's like if they were, power forwards, who cares? And, like you mentioned, Kawhi from San Diego in your backyard. He developed a shot. So
yes,
it's so refreshing to hear somebody that actually knows about basketball be able to, paint a accurate picture. You're not biased one way or the other. Just, hey, this is what I like. This is what could be improved upon. So I appreciate that, man. And before we let you go, let us hear whatever you want to have to say about the Lakers, man, because it's a very polarizing time for the team. So let's close this out with your thoughts on the Lakers' upcoming prospects for winning the title and how you see the distribution of production between AD and LeBron shaking out.
I mean, do you have an hour? No.
We can go too. Mike said I can have an extra hour if I wanted. So
I could talk about the Lakers forever, and the NBA in general I could talk about forever. I love the NBA, but the Lakers, I'm excited about them. I'd say cautiously optimistic would be my outlook for them. I think that just because how poorly last year went, I'm a little nervous because of that. But in the end, we have Anthony Davis and LeBron James. That is a nasty 1-2 combo, and that is certainly good enough to win a title. You add all the pieces around them. There's some good role players around this year. Like last year, we had a weird group of guys around the team. It didn't really fit that well. This year we got a little more shooting, a lot more star power. Got DeMarcus Cousins, another year off his injury, which I think will be good. And again, DeMarcus Cousins not the max player anymore. We haven't seen anything like that for me to be like, oh, look what he was and he could do that again. I don't believe that at all. But I think at $5 million, I think he certainly has value there. Rondo's back, and again, I'm not a big Rondo guy. I kind of wish they spent the money elsewhere, but he has that weird ability. And he's always proven to be good in the playoffs. It's completely bizarre. I don't understand it. But at his price, again, he makes sense. They got Danny Green. I think Danny Green's an elite player to go with LeBron. An elite player to go with Davis. He's a perfect role player, right? KCP's back. Nobody likes KCP, but it is what it is. He shoots. He defends. There's a lot of pieces to like about this team. And I'm excited. Again, we have Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis could be the best power forward in NBA history if he continues his upward trajectory and gets even better. He has that potential, and he's on the Lakers now. It's exciting. I feel like if I was a fan of any other team going in, starting as any other team, I'd be a lot more excited about it. We have LeBron James, which, in my opinion, is the best player in history of basketball. We have Anthony Davis, who could potentially be the best power forward in the NBA, and he needs to get better, and he's longevity. He needs to be able to not get injured all the time. I get there's a lot for him to go, but he has equity to be that. That's really exciting. And I don't care if LeBron's 48 years old or whatever he is. It's exciting, but it kind of sucks being a Lakers fan in this regard, whereas like I've seen great teams. I've seen the Kobe, I've seen the Shaq teams. If I was a fan of anybody else, I'd be so much more excited, I feel like. But between how they did in the last couple of years, and I've seen good Laker teams, and then all of a sudden the Clippers all of a sudden have Kawhi and PG, which is like a complete nightmare. I think that's a nasty combo. And then they have all those role players. I'd be more excited if I had the Clippers roster than the Lakers roster. I'll say that. But again, for how bad the Lakers have been, it's a time to be a little more excited. Absolutely.
Man, I could listen to you talk about basketball all day. So maybe what we could do is have you on the podcast again. I'd love to have you. You absolutely crushed. I don't know if you got a chance to see chat, but everyone's mind's blown. This is exactly why I wanted to do this. There's, a lot of people not doing the right thing for DFS. You're absolutely one of the guys that is doing the right thing. Manny changed my life, and he paved the way for me to have a platform like this. And the number one thing I wanted to do is start getting people like you and learning about your path to victory and the things that you struggle with and how relatable and how positive you are and how realistic. And, man, I would love nothing more than to just do like a week-long podcast and just crush every single NBA team and do a preview with you, man. So whatever you want to do and on from a platform of podcasting, dude, I got you. I'd love to have you on the show anytime, man.
Yeah, I'm not going to commit for sure. I'm not going to say no for sure. That'd actually be pretty exciting. Yeah. I mean, it also helped me out. I could kind of talk through my thoughts because I feel like sometimes I'm all over the place. And hopefully that wasn't the case too much today. I feel like I jump from one topic to the next so quickly. But no, that'd be exciting. I think I could potentially be down for that.
Awesome, man. And no, it's funny because I don't really like sending the script or the agenda to people because I really want it to be organic. And it's almost like you were going from one point to one point that I had laid out. So like I don't know how many podcasts you've done, but you're a seasoned veteran, man, in every sense of the word in playing this game. And yeah, man, let's keep chatting. And, as NBA gets closer and we start to get that itch and that excitement build up, I would definitely love to just give you a platform and I'll drive the ship and you can just walk us through whatever you want to walk us through in terms of previewing these teams and get somebody. It's just so refreshing with so many bad takes out there. There's somebody that's actually, making their living off of playing this game and is so educated and has a realistic and honest perspective. No Laker fan that I know is going to say, I wish we had the Clippers roster. And that's all I need to know about, what makes you so great about playing this game, man. So Pett, thank you, man. This was absolutely incredible. Why don't you tell people the best ways to, follow any of the platforms or any way to stay in touch with what you got going on?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I feel dirty saying the Clippers roster is better than the Lakers roster. It doesn't feel right now. Now that I think about it, I shouldn't probably said that, right? I'm a Lakers guy.
Hey, Mike, we'll
But
take that out in post.
yeah. Just kill that. Sorry, everybody. You guys didn't hear that. But no, if they want to reach me again, I'm on Twitch, PetteyTheft89, just like my screen name. I've just started doing DFS streams actually 2 days ago, and I enjoy it. The community is a lot of fun. We talk baseball right now, and again, I'm not the best baseball player. If I have a lot of bad takes, but in the end, I'm just trying to help people learn and maybe see things a different way that might help them out. But yeah, I don't really Twitter too much. I think I have the same Twitter name. I don't even know what my Twitter name is, but I don't post on social media very much because I feel like I could do it all day if I was doing that. And that's kind of a slippery slope to go down. And there's a lot of DFS Twitter's weird. I don't know, but yeah, just catch me on Twitch on PetteyTheft89.
Awesome, man. Well, like I said, anytime you feel like you got to get something off your chest, this is an open platform for you to come on whenever you want, man. I just can't express how much gratitude I have for you to make time to do this, especially so early in the genesis of this podcast, man. It means the world to me that you did this, and everybody else in the chat is just absolutely in love that you took the time to do this. So thank you, man. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on, and I love the setup you got there. It blows mine out of the water. It's very cool, and I appreciate being a part of this. I'm a believer, again, Manny kind of paved the way for both of us, and I'm a huge fan of more DFS content for everybody.
Absolutely, man. I think there's a huge lane for positive feedback, and it's exciting when I saw that you were your Twitch, I dropped everything that I was doing to hop in, man. So yeah, thank you again. And if you guys, if you haven't had a chance to check out Pett's Twitch stream, it's awesome, and he gives great feedback, and he does not give the answers to the test. So if you're trying to cut corners, don't show up. But if you want to learn how to get better and ask a real life player that's in the trenches every single day, putting in the work, and see him work through a sport that he's trying to get better at, I mean, it should not be a free stream. That's how valuable it is.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And again, like I think some people are hesitant to ask me questions. I'm pretty open in the chat, and again, I don't think there's really such thing as a stupid question because if any question somebody asks me, I don't take it personally, but I take it very serious in that if I disagree with you, I'll have a real conversation with you. I'll try to prove you wrong, and I love when people prove me wrong because again, that's how you get better. That's how you learn.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Challenging those paradigms. I think that's the number one thing that we can do to continually get better. Just keep that beginner's mindset and be okay with learning from where, something we might not have seen. So, Pett, I'm going to let you go, man. I again, we could go all day long. This is something that was so incredibly exciting. This is the first podcast that I was, actually nervous. And, a tribute to the setup is I teamed up with a great recording studio here in Austin. It was one of my goals this summer was to start a podcast. And I was looking for recording studios, and I said, you know what, let's look specifically for a podcast studio, because I said if there's ever a city for something like that to exist, I bet it's awesome. And it has been such a great partner. Anything I want to do technology-wise, we're just challenging everything, and Mike, the producer, has just been 100% supportive, and I can't, dude, I'm a technology dumbass, so I appreciate you loving the setup, but it's all these guys, man.
hey, it doesn't matter how you got there. You got it. That's all that matters.
Amen, brother. Well, Pett, thank you again, buddy. We'll catch up again real soon. And I'm going to listen to this over and over and over to make sure that I didn't miss a single nugget that you put out for us, dude. I really appreciate you being transparent and open and giving the great feedback that you did, buddy.
Absolutely. I appreciate having me on, and we'll do it again soon.
Really appreciate it. Everybody in chat, thank you so much for stopping by. Everybody that's checking this out on YouTube and iTunes and all the podcasting platforms, thank you so much, guys. This is why we do this. This is 100% for you guys, and I really appreciate the support that you're showing for the show and the project. God bless you guys. I'll see you guys the next time.